Welcome to Private Politics, where we prepare for your next political conversation. I'm Jeronimo Cortina, political science professor at the University of Houston.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus, also a political science professor here at the University of Houston. Dizzying week this week. We don't normally have filing deadlines this dramatic, but boy, did we have a long day on that day. We'll talk all about that. We'll talk about some state level politics in terms of changes to property taxes and maybe babies getting rich.
Boom.
We'll see. Farmers too, if Trump has his way. Yep. So let's talk about all that. But let's start with some kind of sad news, and that's that we had two deaths this week of very notable political figures. The first was Bill Ratliff, who was a former lieutenant governor and long-term member of the Texas Senate. And the other was Rod Paige, who was, among other things, the U.S. Secretary of Education. What do you take away from the legacy of these two stalwart Texas politicians?
Well, in terms of Ratliff, I think it was his non-partisan approach to politics, or a political approach to political problems, right? So we don't see that anymore. Yeah. Probably we will never see it ever again in our lifetime. Yeah. And then Secretary of Education, he was the mastermind behind No Child Left Behind, that now is completely obliterated into oblivion. And
dying a slow death on the vine.
Exactly, right? And I think very important public policies.
Yeah. I mean, he was the wizard of HISD. He turned around the district at a time where it was going in the wrong direction. So, yeah, that's fascinating to see. Bill Ratliff told me when I was writing my Rick Perry book that the Senate at that point was not just bipartisan, but nonpartisan.
Interesting.
They were really focused on making Texas better. They focused on things like education reform, which they had some serious issues with in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And ethics reform, too, which was something you have to have serious consensus on to move forward. Yeah. So sad to see them both pass, and really a bygone era of Texas public servant who were focused on servant and not on politics. Yeah. That's a change. So it'd be nice to have a little bit more of that. But let's talk about other news. Obviously, the redistricting fight at the Supreme Court was the biggest news of the week and has really reshaped what's happening in the 2026 election. For those who weren't paying attention that week, effectively, the Supreme Court has allowed for Texas to use the newly drawn maps, which in some people's minds are racially gerrymandered. There are certain members of the Supreme Court who agreed. The majority, though, didn't. And they said that there's a prima facie need to be able to let the legislature do its job here, and that really it's too close to the election to make any big changes anyway. But the bottom line is that Texas will use the new maps, and it's thrown a lot of things into chaos. So what are we to expect, like big picture, from what this holding did?
Well, chaos. You have people running that were not going to run, people that were going to retire now running, people changing districts one way or the other. So once again, is this issue in terms of a very odd procedure. And as we said last week, the Supreme Court has not rule in terms of the merits of the case. This is just a technicality that they do with these shadow or emergency dockets. Right. But still, right, is something that has very important implications, not only in terms of filing deadlines or running for a primary election or not, but very important implications in terms of the future of the Voting Rights Act. Yeah. And we'll see how all these things happen in these new districts.
I mean, it's likely that given the way the court has signaled their interpretation of what Texas did, that the Voting Rights Act is dead, like doornail level dead. So I don't know, what they'll do in these other cases or how they'll parse it, but basically that seems to be the implication to me, which means, among other things, we're going to see yet again, you guessed it, more redistricting, right? Yes. Obviously, at the congressional level, we're going to see some changes across the country, but for sure, I think in Texas, Texas will try to redo it again. You've seen other states basically just completely eliminate opposition parties from potential district victories. That is stunning in and of itself, and this essentially green lights that. The other, though, I think, is that we're likely to see, I think, more of this gerrymandering in Texas at the various levels, right? At the House level, at the Senate level, at the state level. So there's definitely going to be some big changes here. And that, again, is going to consolidate the success that Republicans have had. So for Democrats, they're sounding the alarms. They're raising money on this, trying to get themselves into these positions. But at the end of the day, the district lines matter, because if they're not able to sort of fix that, then they're just going to be essentially fighting this uphill battle all the time.
Yeah.
One of the changes that seems to have resulted from this was that Jasmine Crockett, who is a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Dallas, has decided to run for U.S. Senate. Now, this has been a kind of long time tease, but now effectively, with a minutes to spare, she determined that she was going to run. It has caused a definite internal debate from Democrats. It kicked Colin Allred out of the race, who says, I want to step aside for a smooth and, less contentious primary.
Yep.
Good luck with that. Give me your kind of top level take on Jasmine Crockett's chances of winning this Senate seat.
Well, I don't know. Well, first, she will have to win the primary election, right? So in the primary election, we have two progressive candidates, James Tallarico and, of course, Jasmine Crockett. Both of them bring a different kind of progressiveness, if that's a word, into the fold. And I think it's going to be very interesting the way that they approach this way. I think that in the case of Crockett, she tends to be more focused on a growing part of the Democratic Party. I think that Tallarico, on his hand, he tries to breach perhaps more moderate Republicans and try to stay in the center one way or the other. Or left of center, to put it that way. Yeah. And Crockett is unapologetic on this is who I am, this is what you get, and this is how I confront, for example, President Trump or these other policies. Very confrontational, and it's a style that also, President Trump has, but in a different way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, very different politics. You can imagine. Yes. I think you're exactly right, and I like the way you put that. I told somebody that she is unapologetically Jasmine Crockett. She does not care about the way that this looks and how it's going to be perceived. She is who she is, and that's why Democrats like her, but it's also why some other Democrats don't like her. And I think your framing of this is right, that there is this concern inside the Democratic Party about how to best proceed on this issue, right? That there's a fear that Jasmine Crockett can't win a general election. I don't know that that's true, because the theory of the case is basically that if you can rally Democrats and potentially some non-voters, some of which there are 8 million of in the state, then that's a win set for Democrats that's successful. That's the Beto model from 2018. Now, it's unclear how exactly this plays out. If you look at history for the last 10 years or so, moderates have been the successful winners of these primaries. So there is a sense from some Democrats, at least, especially those voting Democrats, that they think that they want to essentially prioritize winnability, like in a general election, over the capacity for Democrats to really get enthusiastic.
Your point is, yes, they have been very successful in primaries, and then in the general election,
how are they doing in generals? No, exactly, and that's why a lot of Democrats are looking at her candidacy and saying, "Well, look, I mean, everything else we've tried is not working. Here's a new approach. Let's just see." The thing is, they're both going to run a similar kind of campaign, right? I mean, they're going to have their odds with Donald Trump. They're going to take on whoever the Republican is. They're going to raise a bunch of money. It's going to be a national race. There are serious implications to this that will reverberate in the politics of the country, but they're essentially going to be running a very similar kind of race. I can't wait to see a debate between these two. You've got Jasmine Crockett, who is just inflammatory. She is just passionate. And, you've got Tallarico, who's a little more even keel, right? Wants to kind of extend this discussion and talk more about his faith. There's appeals to both, and certainly we're going to see the Democrats split on this. But I think you're exactly right that this is the first time we've had really progressive candidates for this race, and really not a moderate choice. So Democrats really are going to have to do a very strong stress test of this theory going forward. Who's a better matchup with the different Republicans, Cornyn or Paxton or Hunt. That, of course, is a different fight.
Yeah.
that, we've talked about a bunch, and we don't know who will win. But like, this is really a kind of matchup game, and it's a strategy the Democratic voters have to think about too.
Oh, absolutely. But I don't think that Democratic voters are going to be thinking in terms of the general election yet.
Right.
I think that those calculations are left for us and for political commentators, this and that. So here is going to be who's really connecting with the base. And I think that that is the real stress test in terms of the message that Crockett is going to bring and the message that Tallarico is going to bring. The message is going to be the same at the end, right? Is when you look at it, it's going to be the same message. The way that is going to change is the delivery method and how forceful you are pushing that message. I'm not sure if one or the other is better. We're going to see how that plays out in a couple of months.
But the Democrats have to fix the plane while it's being flown, right? They're out there with duct tape trying to make sure the wing doesn't fall off because the infrastructure is non-existent. The party just fired almost all of the people who work for it. They're going to have to raise tens of millions of dollars to even remotely compete with any Republican, regardless of who it is. This is a challenge that they face. So basically, if the Texas Democratic Party were a football team, they'd be the Houston Texans, right? Lots of talent. There's a potential there, but they just haven't found that way to get to that next level. And so I think that's really the conundrum that all the Democrats are facing. But let me get your take on this. Like John Cornyn says in reaction to Jasmine Crockett entering the race that he's delighted, right? Trying to hide the smile on his face. Is this a kind of secret plot from the Republicans to basically put somebody in this position where they're not a winnable, they're not able to win a general election?
I don't know.
Should they be happy, basically, is what I'm asking.
I mean, I would say that on paper they should, right? But here the question is, once again, this message, whoever wins, and let's suppose that Crockett wins the primary election, right? It's going to be, if she focuses on issues that do not fare well with the general electorate, right? Or on issues that are bread and butter.
Right.
I think that the delivery method in terms of Crockett delivering that in contrast with what we know Republicans would do, I think that Crockett's delivery method might be more impactful than the other thing. If this is going to be a general election in terms of values, then I don't know how a Democrat, whether it's Tallarico or Crockett, could evade that and focus on issues. I mean, and we have seen it, right? In this year, Democrats were very successful not getting into the culture wars, and just focusing on issues about affordability, this and that. Today, we know that Miami has a new Democrat mayor for 30 years. Why? Pretending that Trump did not exist. Right?
Ignore Donald Trump, especially in his backyard, right?
Just like whatever.
And the Republicans tried to nationalize that race, and it was a mistake. And the same thing's going to happen here for sure because it's almost unavoidable. But a smart candidate will basically run their race and forget about Donald Trump. But people are looking at Jasmine Crockett's first ad, which was clever, I think, and really well done. But basically, it was all about Donald Trump. Her basically getting her names called by Donald Trump, which certainly magnifies her, but may not magnify kind of the message. So that's what I think some Democrats are worried about. The other is that she's not won a competitive primary. She's not won a competitive general. So there needs to be some battle-tested nature here. And a lot of people looked at Colin Allred and said, well, he's done that. Like, he can definitely make that happen. But for her, they're not sure. She also has a tendency to, inflame Republicans, which, certainly it's going to rile up the Democratic base, but it's also going to rile up the Republicans. So there is a kind of counterweight to that is going to make this a very competitive race.
Right. But as you said, is the 8 million non-voters. How you can rally those folks.
My friend, you and I have spent the better part of the last couple of years studying this in depth. And you know as well as I that it is really hard to get people to vote who don't otherwise typically vote. At the margins, you can make those changes. Maybe that's the winning strategy. Like, remember, the difference between O'Rourke and Cruz in 18 was like 200,000 votes. If you can make up that difference with some non-voters, maybe. But like, it sounds like nothing, 200,000 votes, in a state the size of Texas, but that's a lot of votes.
It's a lot of votes.
When moving them is so expensive and the messaging has to be so precise.
Well, so precise, but also I think that the contextual issues in terms of the economy, in terms of employment, in terms of inflation, are siding towards the Democrats. Now,
the sea is like calm for Democrats, right?
Yes.
But of course, they still have to get that boat across.
Exactly. The boat and get the duct tape ready and the corks to plug all those potential holes. So we'll see.
So true.
Let's
see. Talk a little bit about South Texas. And that's something we talked about last week, where Henry Cuellar was given a pardon kind of surprisingly by Donald Trump.
Out of the blue.
Donald Trump apparently expected something for it, which was that he wanted to see Henry Cuellar switch parties because this was like a days before the filing deadline. That didn't happen. And Donald Trump basically says, well, like, so much for loyalty, no more Mr. Nice Guy next time. It feels like kind of a Sopranos plot where, like, somebody's trying to like make something happen but doesn't overtly make that consideration. So what do you make of this? Do you think that Henry Cuellar is going to suffer as a result of this? Or is this just basically a green light? I'm going to throw one log on the fire here to help, and that's that basically he was able to get his committee position back. He had been suspended from it, but he's now going to be back on the Appropriations Committee, which is an extremely important committee in Congress. So it's almost like he's, sailing clear here. What do you think?
Well, he is. In terms of re-election, once again, is this issue whether there's going to be a primary challenger that can outflank him from the left. And as you know, was this potential political scandal a thing that matters for his voters?
Not anymore.
Nope.
He's not going to jail now, or his wife. And Donald Trump has, to some degree, laid hands on him, blessing this, because although he had this friction about that, you can see certainly some people read into this that Donald Trump essentially like pardoned him because he thought that he was on the same page as he was on border issues and not on the same page as Biden. That's like a early Christmas gift to Henry Cuellar, right?
Oh, yeah.
In a district that, was a pretty swingy district that, a Trump, kind of aligned candidate could do well in. So interesting to see. Let's talk more Texas politics, though, because it's ever interesting. Dan Patrick had a couple of ideas about giving money away this week, which is a very un-Dan Patrick-like thing to do. But one of the things was that he was going to essentially propose a state program that was going to parallel the federal program that Donald Trump proposed to give every child born in the state $1,000. The other is that he proposed to increase the homestead exemption on property taxes again, and basically leveling it to what the kind of 55 and up we're going to get. At this point, it's still people who are 65 and up. He calls it Operation Double Nickel. I call it Operation, oh my gosh, this is a ton of money. Gulp. What do you think about this? This is Dan Patrick, the most conservative Republican the state has ever seen, essentially having these kind of programs that are giving people free money.
Yeah, Lina Hidalgo's Harris County, let's give money away type of stuff, being sued by A.G. Paxton. And I don't know if A.G. Paxton is going to sue the the lieutenant governor and say that, no, you cannot do that. Or
he better hurry.
Because, just look at Harris County, what happened, right? But anyways.
Love to see that battle, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. I'm telling you right now. The interesting part here is that, once again, we're putting a lot of strain in our future finances. We're spending money that we have right now, but that we don't know if we're going to have in a couple of years. So that is a very risky move. Giving money to every newborn in Texas, you're talking about, I don't know, maybe $300 million a year, right? Give and take. In 2023, the figure was around 388,000 newborns in Texas, according to the CDC. So that's a lot of money.
No, and in a biennial budget, that's $1 billion, right? That adds up fast. And the state now has money, but not a lot to play with. And if you start to give away this money, it could be complicated. the other thing is that Republicans are looking at this and saying, well, if there's money to be given, then why don't you just give the money back to taxpayers in the form of rebates or reduction in the sales tax or whatever it is.
Right.
So that's a compelling question. And there's also very conservative Republicans pushing back and saying, well, look, a lot of people, are born here and they're not like legally allowed to be here. And so that gets a problem too. So there's just a lot of, I think, confusion about this. But it does underscore a couple things to me. Number one, Donald Trump runs Texas, right? Like he says, we want to do this at the federal level. Dan Patrick says, yeah, let's do it at the state level. The other is that Patrick and Abbott have a disagreement about how to handle property taxes.
Yep.
We just chatted about this briefly a couple weeks ago, but Greg Abbott in his sort of proposal for re-election said, look, I want to eliminate property taxes. Dan Patrick literally this week said that's not possible, right? It would mean increasing the sales tax by 20 cents, which is not practical.
Right.
So what do you make of this internal fight in the Republican Party about how to fix one of the most hated taxes, and that's property taxes?
Well, yeah, it is the most hated taxes, and it gives them these rare public fighting. At the end, everything it's fine eventually. But once again, it's different ways of how to tackle this problem that is property taxes. And I think that here is who's going to be the owner of this particular issue, right?
Yeah.
Is it going to be the governor or is it going to be the lieutenant governor? So the type of proposals to fix property taxes are one way or the other the most creative so far.
Yeah.
But once again, the problem is we don't have income tax in Texas, right? Property tax is the one that funds a lot of stuff. So
it's going to be expensive and potentially damaging. Like there are people who have short memories here. The 80s, serious downturns, early 2000s, serious downturns. There's just a lot of complications when you put kind of all your dollars into one basket. So we'll see how this really shakes out. Like these are proposals, right? Like we're going to study
exactly the numbers.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that we're starting to see a little bit more is the Texas economy being diversified. But again, we're going to do Bitcoin mining, but that creates a lot of problems for the power.
I didn't put this on our list, but yeah, Texas is investing at like a lot of money.
$5 million
into Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, okay.
And like, I don't know about you, man, but my Bitcoin tanked in the last month. So Texas just invested a bunch of money that like went down the drain.
Bitcoin, I buy gold nuggets.
You keep your money under the bed. Like, yeah, you need to diversify your own holdings.
Well, different beds.
So true.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a couple of themes that connect these together. That is that the Supreme Court has declined to hear a Texas book ban appeal in a case that was very closely watched by free speech advocates. A lower court had basically said that this law can go into effect where, stemming from a lawsuit in 2022 from a particular policy from the legislature, that the counties could remove from public libraries books that are dealing with sex, race, or gender themes that touch on all kinds of different complicated subjects that the Republicans in the bill say are problematic. This means that some books, like with the titles It's Perfectly Normal, Changing Bodies, Growing Up, Sex and Sexual Health, was off the shelf, as well as Larry the Farting Leprechaun. So just all kinds of scandals happening there. What do you make of the politics of this and the legal fight about whether or not Texas can inject these policies from the state to the local levels?
Well, I mean, it's once again a surprising issue in terms of the Supreme Court saying or refusing to hear this case means that the Fifth Circuit's ruling is going to remain in effect. And basically, the Fifth Circuit said that First Amendment does not guarantee a right to receive information from public libraries. Okay. That's fine. This is going to have an impact in a number of states, in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. And the critics of this ruling argue that this is going to undermine free speech and allows local governments to exert this control over what information is accessible to the public or not. And yes, that has implications for these issues in terms of First Amendment rights or not.
Yeah, and also it has implications to what local governments can and can't do. This isn't a new policy. This is something that local governments have been allowed to do, but now the state essentially puts a blanket across it. So it does mean that this is going to be something that the state's going to have to contend with at the local level, but that other states too can now essentially kind of wade into as well. If the court's not going to take this case, then perhaps other states can engage in the same kind of activity without the fear of there being some kind of a legislative or legal oversight. Let's shift gears and talk about national politics, and that's Donald Trump. He is proposing a plan to give away $12 billion in assistance to farmers who are harmed by tariffs. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, it's one way of saying oops.
Or sorry.
Right. Oops, I'm sorry. Well, yeah.
Oops, and
I'm sorry.
sorry.
And it's basically given $11 billion to crop farmers, especially those that have struggled, soybean producers, because China is not buying much more soybeans from American farmers. So it's just a way of trying to fix a situation that was created by the Trump administration. Whether it has this distributed effect on the midterm election, we'll see.
Yeah, this is pretty common for presidents, right? They definitely reward through this distributive politics, like swing states and states that they've won. So we're likely to see that. And this is true because most of these states are voting for Donald Trump to the tune of 60 to 70%. So he's getting these votes. But there are a lot of concerned farmers out there. And Republicans, frankly, are pushing back saying, look, you're going to benefit agribusiness, large companies over small farmers. And, you know, this is also the case that it just shows you the trade question is not really focused on what's happening for people. And that is another damage point for Donald Trump, who says, by the way, that he gets an A++++ for the economy. You and I are in the midst of grading, and we know the university won't let us give that many pluses, but he has given himself a very favorable grade. That's a problem, I think, because he's not recognizing that there is a crisis happening for American voters, and I think that's going to be a real blind spot for him.
Well, but it's a real blind spot because whether you are, once again, this is a supermarket effect. Prices are prices, period.
And you can't talk your way out of the fact that bacon's too expensive to buy.
It's very,
especially
very
with holidays coming up.
Absolutely.
Got to stock that fridge.
And on that savory note, that's it for this week. I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
And I'm Brendan Rottinghaus. The party keeps up next week.